tell you to be good, to be nice, to be understanding. They say kindness is the key. Patience, grace, forgiveness. They hand you a script written by people who profit off your silence, who find comfort in your compliance. They tell you to be the better person while they spit on your name behind closed doors, while they gut your character and expect you to say thank you for the opportunity. And you, being raised on fairness, on virtue, on the hope that playing by the rules wins the game, believed it, until the day you realized the rules were written to break you, until the day you saw that being good was never about morality. It was about control, about convenience, about making you predictable. And the moment you saw through it all, you felt it. The desire not to destroy, but to reclaim. Not to lash out, but to redefine. That was the day the villain in you opened its eyes and smiled. You are not the villain because you chose destruction. You became the villain because you refused to be destroyed. Because you stopped apologizing for the fire in your chest. Because you stopped bleeding in public just to keep the peace. Society loves a broken soul as long as they're quiet. They'll romanticize your pain, parade your suffering, call it beautiful, as long as you don't make anyone uncomfortable. But the moment you weaponize your clarity, the moment you walk into a room without shame, without explanation, they shift. You become too much, too cold, too confident. But strength is threatening when it grows from trauma instead of titles. And now that you've built it from the ruins, they'll label you the villain, not because you're evil, but because they no longer own you. The villain is not the monster. The villain is the one who dares to shatter illusions. You started asking questions they couldn't answer, started setting boundaries they couldn't cross, started becoming someone who didn't bend when pushed, and suddenly, you became dangerous. Not by choice, but by necessity. Because you realized they never loved you. They loved your obedience. And when you stopped handing over pieces of yourself for approval, they panicked. The people who praised your loyalty now called you disloyal. The ones who loved your compassion now said you were cruel. But they weren't describing you. They were describing the loss of control. You killed the version of you they depended on. And that death, that was your birth. Villains aren't born in shadows. They're built in silence, in the long, aching wait for someone to finally hear your truth. And when no one does, when the crowd praises your tormentors, when the world calls your compliance noble, you change. You stop waiting. You start building. You don't scream anymore. You calculate. You don't cry where they can see it. You cry behind closed doors, then walk out sharper, colder, not because you lost your heart, but because you realized it was being drained for people who never intended to pour back. You learned to sit in pain without romanticizing it. You learned to speak only when the words were knives. And most importantly, you learned to walk away without leaving a door open. The villain is the version of you that saves you, the one that stops waiting for mercy and starts creating dominion. They will call you toxic when you stop accepting disrespect. They will call you controlling when you stop being manipulated. They will say you've changed when you finally choose yourself. Let them. Let them talk. Let them cry over the version of you they can no longer feed off. Because they never feared losing you. They feared losing access to your sacrifice. You were never the villain until you became unavailable. Until your silence stopped sounding like submission. Until your confidence stopped asking for consensus. You didn't become worse. You became real. And reality, when it stops catering to fantasies, becomes terrifying. You started acting like your time matters, like your peace is expensive, like your body, your mind, your energy are not communal property, and they couldn't handle that. So now you wear the crown with horns. The villain knows something heroes don't, that winning requires losing something first, naivety, the illusion that being good will shield you, that kindness always returns, that if you're just soft enough, the world will bend for you. But the villain learns that softness gets devoured, that wolves do not honor sheep, they slaughter them. So you changed form. You didn't lose your soul. You armored it. You didn't lose your heart. You sharpened it. You became what survival demanded. And now, you walk differently, speak differently, think differently. You no longer enter rooms looking to be accepted. You enter them to observe, to study, to choose who earns your presence. You don't fight for inclusion. You build your own halls and lock the door behind you. Winning, to the villain, means not just surviving, but designing the battlefield. Understand this. The villain is not the one who causes pain. The villain is the one who stops allowing theirs to be ignored. When you speak with venom, it's because you were fed poison first. When you withdraw without explanation, it's because they ignored 1,000 warnings you whispered with shaking hands. Now, your hands no longer shake. Now, your words no longer tremble. And because you found your edge, they flinch, they recoil, they gather in circles and say you've changed. They call you bitter. But bitterness is just the flavor of clarity on a tongue that's tasted too many lies. You don't wear their labels anymore. You wear results. You wear silence that unnerves them. And in their discomfort, they begin to understand what they lost. You didn't seek revenge. You just stopped playing victim. And nothing is more terrifying than a soul that stopped bleeding and started building. Winning doesn't come by following the script. It comes by tearing the script in half and writing your own. The villain does not wait for the plot to resolve. They resolve it. They cut ties without ceremony. They destroy what destroys them. They make choices without guilt. Because guilt is a leash. And you've removed it. You are no longer waiting for approval from the very people who fed off your insecurity. You're no longer asking for peace from people who only understand power. You walk into your own narrative now, not as a side character in someone else's story, but as the force that shifts the plot. You don't need a title. You don't need applause. You need results. And results don't come from virtue. They come from vision. And vision requires rebellion. You became the villain because being the hero never saved you. You followed the rules. You kept your promises. You bit your tongue. You took the high road, even when it led you off a cliff. And where did it get you? Hollow, tired, resentful. So you stepped off the pedestal. You burned the cape, and you looked in the mirror, not to mourn who you were, but to welcome who you were becoming. Someone who doesn't need permission to be powerful. Someone who doesn't water down truth to protect fragile egos. Someone who is feared not because they're cruel, but because they're clear. Crystal clear about what they'll accept, who they'll trust, and how much of themselves they're willing to give. So if you must be the villain to win, be the villain. Be the one who no longer breaks for people who never learned how to handle your strength. Be the one who walks away mid-sentence if the room no longer deserves your presence. Be the one who smiles at misunderstanding because you've stopped needing to be known to feel whole. You are not here to be liked. You are here to become undeniable. And that transformation comes at a price. You must let them hate you. You must let them curse the day you stopped sacrificing your soul for their comfort. Because their hate is proof you're finally free. Let it burn. Let it echo. Let it remind you. You were never weak. You were just unfinished. And now, you are complete, whole, relentless, and finally, victorious.